Hey gang, Dr. Matthew Loop here, and I am excited to bring you this training today. If you received one of my messages or emails, I think you're going to be blown away, quite honestly, by what we chat about and what our special guest discusses regarding private lending. So, if you're on this training right now, you are either a doctor, entrepreneur, professional that has considered maybe lending money out for a specific interest rate, private money lending, and or you're looking to access potentially private money. And, when I started looking at some of the world's wealthiest people, like I'm kind of obsessed with just studying those that have went on before and done great things. You start to find these common denominators in all of them. And one of those common denominators is they've learned how to use private money creatively. They don't just focus on the institutional side of things like the big banks, whether it's PNC, Bank of America, and whatever. And I think typically, if we're investors and we're trying to buy real estate, that's one of the things that we're thinking about, like, oh, I got to go through this and pretty much sacrifice my firstborn child to get in here. And it takes like I don't know, a month and all this red tape, and it's just kind of crazy in the process. And then from the other side of the coin, as somebody, if you have cash sitting on the sidelines and you're looking for more of a secure investment that's backed by a physical piece of real estate, I think you're going to find this really, really eye-opening. And I'd like to introduce our guest, uh, Mike. Mike Seidl and I, we actually met in a separate mastermind called the DM Alliance. And when I met him, we talked a lot about travel, and we both have a very strong passion for that, traveling the world and experience different cultures and outdoor activities. And just as he was talking, he was just sharing about what he was doing in that private lending space, and I was blown away because it's not something that I had personally thought about before on both sides of the coin. But I knew when you were looking at the common denominators of the top 1%, this is just something that was one of them. So, Mike, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule today for being on this. Like I said, we're going to email this replay to the clients and subscribers that are on my list. And but again, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. I'm excited. I like to spread the word about private lending because of all of the options that it gives on both sides of the coin, either as a lender or as a borrower. And it can be a lot of fun.
100%. And I wanted to start off to give some context and background too. And I don't want you to, even though you're a humble guy, I don't want you to be humble because you didn't take a course last week and you didn't learn about private lending. You've been in this game a very long time and have a very fascinating entrepreneurial journey. So can you kind of explain with to the doctors and professionals on this training, like where you came from, like how you evolved into this scenario and what you're doing now?
Ah, okay. Well, I started my first business back in 1987. We got my former business partner got a postcard in the mail selling franchises for medical alert systems. It ended up not being a franchise according to the FTC, but that's how they tried to sell it. And we started with an answering machine in his mother's basement on her dryer because that's all we could afford. Understand that I don't come from money. I can name 20 or so people that I grew up with that are dead in jail. I have been in jail. My dad left when I was 5, so I know what it's like to go to bed hungry. And we got this postcard, and I thought, there's a lot of older people that live in Massachusetts, and people are getting older because of the baby boomers. This might be something. So we just went down, we did their training, we jumped into it. Make the story not too much detail to it. We sold it after 10 years to a public company. We had several thousand customers in 15 states. A number of states started to approve it through Medicaid. So if people were on Medicaid and they had appropriate conditions, the state would pay for it. So that was back in 98 that I sold it. We sold it. I traveled around the US. We took 5 years off altogether. And Lois and I, for 16 months of that, traveled around the US in a motorhome. We did 56,000 miles in 39 states in 16 months between the motorhome and the car combined. Oh, yeah,
Nice.
we drove up to Alaska. Yeah, 39 states. We have subsequently done the rest. So now we've done all 50, just as a side note. I know you talked about how I like to travel, just like you. I'm addicted. Um, and then after taking the time off, I'm also an avid whitewater kayaker. And where I was living in Massachusetts at the time was about 2.5 hours away from the whitewater that I could get to, that I could do for my skill set. And after the traveling, we decided, we want to go someplace else. We ended up in Idaho, and now I'm 45 minutes from a river and I can kayak year round. I don't in the winter. I'm beyond that. I'm okay with being nice and warm. Uh, but yeah, so that's how we ended up in Idaho. And I started a second company here in the construction industry, specifically the niche of property restoration. So fire, water, vehicle impact, et cetera. And on that company, I didn't have a partner. And with my team, we built it up to, we did between 250 and 300 jobs a year. And we would do structural drying, fire. We did suicide, unattended death cleanup, et cetera, mold, and everything that goes along with that. And after 11 years of that and wanting to kill myself because it's a 24/7 business and people will call you at 2 o'clock in the morning to ask a question, I just was done with it. So I sold that to another company that was on the eastern side of the state. And then right after that, I started lending, handshake loans. What I learned between my first business and my second business is don't take time off because your mind goes to mush. And it took about a year for my mind to get back. And I'll never do that again. So that's why I jumped right into this business back in 2017. And I started doing some loans with people that I knew. They were kind of handshake loans.
Mm-hmm.
And then I happened to get on the phone with somebody who has over $100 million of his personal capital on the street. They have their own family office. And he was referred to me by someone else in my network. And he said it would be a 5-minute call because he was busy. He happens to have majored in economics. So did I. So we kind of had a bromance going on. And then he just explained the world of private lending to me. And what was a 5-minute call ended up being about 45 minutes. And I've met with him a couple of times after that in person to discuss private lending and other investment opportunities as well. He is now into angel investing and he's putting stuff in tech and he started some funds around that. So he's the one who explained it to me and he's been doing it for 20 or so years. So then what I did was I came back after, I thought through what I spoke with him about, spoke with some financial advisors, and back in 2019, I sold millions of dollars of my personal capital on the stock market. I got rid of it and dove into private lending in a very serious way. After about 2 years of playing with my own money, I had people come to me and say, hey, I want to put some money on the street with you. And I said, yeah, no, I want to try with my own money and so that I get proof of concept. And in 2021, a friend of mine came to me, gave me some grief that I had been at it for 2 years and never spoke with him and I was taking money from other people. And I started putting his money and friends and family, and we started putting a lot more money on the street. So that's where I am today. I was doing it individually, and I recently partnered with somebody else who has 4 years experience. And now we've started a fund, and altogether we have a little over $20 million on the street.
Nice, nice. And for those that might not be familiar, so the concept of private lending as compared to the typical institutional bank loans versus, other types of lending, can you like at a second grade level break it down just, for and I guess like the advantages of doing that versus the typical route that maybe a doctor or professional would usually go either well, let's do this two ways. So if a doctor or professional, let's say they want to borrow money, and they're looking to do flips or whatever. But the other side of the equation, I'll ask you, because I really want to get into the investing side, those that might have some capital on the sidelines, specifically, why is that better or safer? And, I'm certainly not an attorney, financial advisor. You guys got to do all that stuff, but I'm curious why this is just really uh, just a beautiful thing.
Okay, so to explain the differences, when you are dealing with a bank, I guess there are three different pieces to this puzzle here. When you are dealing with a bank, you're dealing with an institution that's been around for X number of years, and they have an institutionalized way of doing things, and they do everything based on data. Your larger banks. Your smaller banks will put some the human side into it, but they certainly have guidelines because they are regulated by the federal government and they have to show certain profit margins, they have to have so much capital available, et cetera. When it comes to private lending, which is, and then the next piece is if some of your people are flipping right now, they work with hard money lenders. Most hard money lenders that are out there are simply loan originators. And they are doing one of two things, or one of several things. They can have a line of credit from a bank, and they are going by the guidelines of that line of credit from the bank. They could have a person that they're selling their notes to. It could be just one institution that they're selling their notes to. If they get larger, they're selling the notes to multiple institutions. And the thing about it is they are simply loan originators, and they have to follow the guidelines of whoever it is that's going to buy that note on the end. So they have limited ability to be flexible because it's got to be in the box. Additionally, the end buyer of the note can ultimately say no, and they're not going to fund the loan. So you can get to closing, and it happens with hard money lenders. You get to closing, and somebody up the food chain has decided that, no, this isn't a good risk for us, and you're left holding the bag at closing. Private lenders, such as myself, true private lenders, is we are using private capital. We're using our capital. Myself and my partner have several million in the fund of our own capital, and then we are using investor capital. So we've created a community of people that want the safe, consistent returns of real estate. The advantage that we offer is speed, and it is absolutely relationship based. I don't lend money to somebody unless I know them. They have to be referred by somebody. We have conversations on the phone. We'll do a Zoom, or I'll meet them in person. And it is truly relationship based, and we can be fast. This is an extreme situation, but the most extreme one that I had was I had somebody that I had known for 3 years. He's in the multifamily space, and he had a raise that he was doing from multifamily syndication. He had $4 million from one individual of his, I think it was a $10 million raise that he was doing altogether. He had $4 million that was guaranteed, or was committed by somebody. And 24 hours before closing, the guy said, listen, my property didn't sell. I can't come to the table with money. So my buddy was left calling people that evening until about 10 o'clock. He raised $2 million. The next day, he called me at about 7 o'clock in the morning, and he said, I need $2 million. That's what I have to have. My $1 million is going to go hard. And for those of you who don't know what that means, if it doesn't close, he lost his $1 million. He's out, he and his investors. So clearly he didn't want to do that. Well, when he called me, he said, I'll take anything you got. I don't care if it's $50. I got to raise $2 million by 4 o'clock this afternoon. And I said, well, sit tight. I know that I just had a couple payoffs. Let me look at my spreadsheet. And he sent me his information. But I said, I can give you a soft yes without looking at your information. I have $2 million available. Let me get on the phone with my attorney and see if I can pull this all together. I spoke with my attorney. He said, we're good to go. I can do it. And the person who was the borrower, because he does large projects, he understands everything has to be transparent. And he sent me a folder, a link to a folder that probably had 600 or 700 pages of documentation in it. So sent that off to my attorney. I reviewed everything, spent a couple hours doing it, and we were able to lend him $2 million in 6 hours that he kept for, it was 90 days. It actually was a 90-day loan. He kept it for 10 weeks, so a little under 90 days. So there's the speed factor. When it comes to people that are in my circle that I actually have experience with, I can have people that I don't have experience with, so I'm a little more conservative. And I think any lender should be, because you don't know somebody until you live with them. In this case here, you don't know somebody until you lend to them. So if it's somebody that I've got a relationship and we've had at least one successful loan, because of the flexibility, if they have title done and we have funds available, we can close a loan same day. Because the documents are the documents. My attorney is set up to turn these quick, and we have a system in place. Many loans close in 3 days to a week. So the advantage that private money is for the end borrower is that it's speed and it's relationship based. A hard money lender is not going to respond that fast. They just can't. And because I was a contractor, and it was 13 years altogether that I had my restoration company, I've seen everything that can happen to a house. So if you send me photos, I know what a new tile job looks like and an old tile job. I know what a new roof looks like. So I don't need to have somebody on site. I just need photos. And we have our borrowers use a specific app, and it geolocates. So I can make sure that they're actually there. Now, I trust the people, but it's money. So
hmm
you trust, but you verify everything. And they send us photos and we're able to look at them quickly and say, yeah, this is good. And we take them either for the draw or for the initial loan. So that's the advantage and general information on the borrower side. You
And the
also
speed,
asked
I
me,
just want to make a comment on that with the speed. Like even if you're just starting out, you're thinking about you want to get into real estate investing or fixing and flipping or something, and there's a lot of money in that. It's you got to think of the opportunity cost as well. Like, paying whatever small percentage to a private lender to get access to fast capital. And if you've got like what Mike said, all the documentation, I mean, you need someone like this in your back pocket to that you've built a relationship with that ultimately can pull the trigger really quick on these deals. And this is speed is the name of the game. And there's, who knows how many other people are looking at similar properties. And I just, that can't be understated just how fast it is. And again, going from somebody that's invested in many properties, doing the old school traditional way, because I didn't know any better. It's just like going through every little hoop and hurdle, and you don't even know if you got it. And 2 months later, it's just a very bizarre process. But this just ultimately simplifies it. So go ahead.
it's funny that you say that because what I find is the guys who are borrowing $2 million never ask what the interest rate is.
Sure.
And the person who wants 70,000 wants to negotiate the interest rate. And I find it such an interesting dichotomy between the two. The guy who got the $2 million in 6 hours, once I looked at everything, I said, okay, this is quick
hmm
and you understand the speed of capital and the value of speed. It's going to be 2% per month. He said, yeah, I don't care. And
hmm
I thought we were going to have a conversation. It was the first time I had done a loan of that size that fast. He said, Mike,
hmm
you don't, this is like a $50 million project.
hmm
Paying you a couple extra grand and not having to negotiate with somebody and not know if it's going to come in. You tell me it's going to come in. I know it's coming in. I'm paying you. I don't care. Um, it's a very interesting thing. And then it's interesting on the investor side as well. If I have somebody who wants to give us $50,000 to put on the street, they ask many more questions than somebody. I've got one guy who has $8 million with us.
hmm
And it's very interesting because the guy who had the 50,000 asked a ton of questions. It was probably like 45 minutes to an hour, one question after another. And I'm fine with answering them. And then I get on this, and a lot of it is about rate. Well, I can put it in Bitcoin. I can do this. I can do
hmm
this. And he kept asking me to justify it. And then I have the guy who's got 8 million, and his questions were centered around how are you going to keep my money safe? And I found that very interesting when I asked him why those, and it took 10 minutes for him to make a decision based on the questions the questions he asked, my answers. And I said, well, why aren't you asking more questions? He said, the thing that I'm concerned about is that I not lose my capital. That's what I care about. Any return I get on it for me is complete gravy. And that's the way I look at it is my risk. This is my safe money is the way I'm looking at it. I've got my money in a bank right now getting 3%. You're telling me you're going to pay me 10%. Well, I can do the math on that. That's a
hmm
300 and
hmm
was that a 333% increase on my return. Is that right? 3%, 10%. So I can do the math on that very simple. And that works for me. And it's backed by real estate. I know real estate doesn't go down that fast. So yeah, I'm good. That's what I need to know is that I'm not going to lose my capital. So yeah, when it comes to speed, when I have somebody who needs a lot of money very fast, or they need money very fast, and they are an experienced investor, they don't
hmm
care what they're paying for it.
hmm
Because what they're looking at is something I learned, I had heard in business years ago. There's no such thing as loss on profit. Let's move on. If you're going to fund it, let's go.
hmm
And they just move on to the next deal.
me ask you a question because there's no guarantees in anything, obviously, and any investment comes with risk. Obviously, you're that should go without saying, but I know we have to say that. But everything that I've seemed to research, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you were to lend out your own money, like you talk about, or people that would invest with you to lend out their capital, It's arguably one of the most safest ways because, like you said, it's backed by a physical piece of real estate, and you don't, to my understanding, you don't take like the third position on a note. Can you really go into that process? Because it almost seems a little too good to be true when you first think about it. Like, is it really that safe? Like, can you explain that a little bit more?
Okay. For me, before I got into business, when I got out of college, I used to counsel sexually abused kids. I worked at a facility for sexually and physically abused kids. I've worked in a psych hospital as a mental health worker, and I ran a group home for developmentally disabled, delayed individuals. So when I get into any type of relationship, I always look at the jockey first, and I want to know what are they about? Is this someone that I feel comfortable with?
Hmm.
And for me, that's 90% of my lending decision is based on the individual because I'm getting on a Zoom call with them and I'm reading them as individuals. And even if you don't have the formal experience that I have,
Hmm.
everybody gets a feeling in their stomach if something's not right. It's something that's in all of us.
Sure.
And quite frankly, women are better at it because they have to deal with men. So um, I'm looking at the individual. So you have to look at the person first. From a technical side, how many flips have they done? You take a look at their HUDs or their closing statements, the settlement statements they're called now, and you want to see what they bought it for and what they sold it for, so you have an idea of what their profit was. You want to possibly speak with one of their other lenders. You can do a check on their credit. You want to get a good feel for them. And then what you also do is not only do you have the purchase price, you want to make sure that you're looking at the repairs that they're going to do. Do the repairs make sense? Are they going to put in a $50,000 kitchen into a $200,000 house? No, that doesn't fly. That just doesn't work. The math
Mhm.
doesn't work. So you want to ask some questions like that. And you can go into detail. You can call the local Home Depot and you can say, what does it cost for labor to install a laminate floor? The local Home Depot will tell you. And that's a very easy question to answer. So you want to go and you want to do some digging into what it is that they're presenting to you. And if you've got a good deal on the table, the probability of you losing everything is extremely low because a stock can lose its value overnight. A
Sure.
house
Sure.
does not. It just doesn't. Real estate, I find, goes down in quarters. It doesn't go down overnight. So in the market that we're in right now, for example, what we will do is we will give a value of the property as we see it today, and then what we're going to see it in 9 months down the road. Now, the majority of our loans are close out in about 6 months, but we go to 9 months because that's the length of the loan.
Mhm.
And whereas in 2022, 2023, we would figure that it's going to be worth more, now we figure it's going to be worth less. So when we run our comps, our valuations of the property, or what's in the industry ARV, after repair value, we will actually decrease it from what it is today. And then we have a number of programs that we use. For example, we use housing alerts. He's a gentleman out of Florida, and he has a tremendous amount of data, and it will tell us what's going on in a market, and we'll see what's trending if it's a market that we're not familiar with. So you're going to protect yourself by looking at the individual, looking at the property that they're lending on, and making sure that the numbers work. Um, yeah. Does
Do,
that answer
do
your
you
question? Sorry,
now
kind of
do
went
you
on.
always, yeah, yeah, for sure. Do you always take the first position on these loans? So let's say I'm investing
Good question.
200,000 with you right now and I say, Mike, all right, let's put this on the street. Again, securing my capital, is it always, like how does that whole process work?
Well, here's where we can get a little fancy because of our experience. When we were starting out, we always took first position loans, and that's it.
Hmm.
But now that we have the experience, what we've learned that we can do. So let me back. If you have a first position loan, you get paid first before anybody else.
Yeah, can you explain that? Like, so let's say, God forbid, let's take the worst scenario happens. I give money, and of course there's risk and everything, but like explain the worst case scenario just so we can get, what that looks like.
Let me add in one more piece for the
Okay.
security.
Okay.
What'll happen is on any closing that you're involved in, you need a title company involved. And you
Hmm.
want to make sure that you have title insurance. And what the title company does is they are in the middle and they bring both parties together. And you will get, they will not only get title insurance, but they will also record the mortgage with the county clerk, so
Mhm.
that nobody can come in front of you. They check to make sure nobody else is already there. They check to make sure that whoever is there before you is paid off and your note is in first position. So
Mhm.
that's a tremendous amount of protection for you.
Mhm.
So I'm sorry, ask your question again.
Yeah, so that was part of my, so ensuring
Yep.
that like if I give you, let's say $200,000,
Ah,
it's the safety aspect because you're taking first position, which means that literally if the house something happened,
yep.
it goes to garbage or whatever, like your money's already taken care of, it's not plummeting to zero type of thing.
Correct. You've got a couple things. As I said, you're in first position, but when you lend, you don't lend 100% of the value of the property.
That's right.
We
Yeah.
don't lend any more than 80% of the purchase price, and we'll lend 100% of repairs, a maximum of 70% combined. So on a $200,000 house, ARV of the house, regardless of what they say to us, we won't lend more than $140,000.
So that ensures you're never upside down. You can never be upside down.
Bingo. I never want to be upside down in a house. Now,
100%. Yeah.
what we
Okay.
do is with the repair funds, in order to protect us, we do not release the repair funds on day one. You complete repairs, and we will
Hmm.
do it as they go along. For example, if they are going to do painting, after they're done with the painting, we get
Hmm.
photos of every single room that they painted in. We
Hmm.
look at their scope of work that they gave to us in the beginning, and we will then release funds just for the painting up to the amount of the budget on the painting. So we are always protecting our money as we go along by having no more than 80% of the purchase price, no more than 70% all in, and releasing repair funds after the repairs have been done. And that's something one needs to be aware of as a private lender. Is it's not uncommon for someone to say, well, I need some money to get the job started. No, you don't. Well, how am I going to get the contractor to start? Let him start. I was a contractor for 13 years. He has
Hmm.
lines of credit. He doesn't pay his
Hmm.
employees every week, every day. He pays them every week or two. So as he completes work, I will release money to you the same day. You show me proof that it's done, and I'm happy to release the money to you, and you can release it to him, and he covers his payroll and his expenses. But Home Depot has 30 to 45-day terms on his materials, and most people are buying from Home Depot or a local supply house, and they're going to have similar terms. So um, the protection is the amount you put down. You've got your title insurance. You're in first position. You don't release funds up front, and you also get property insurance. And
Hmm.
as the lender, we are named as the loss payee on the insurance. So
Hmm.
the borrower will get the money. The borrower's name will be on it. Our name will be on it, and they can't cash the check until we okay it. And
Nice.
having been in the restoration industry, I know that some banks won't send it to the borrower. They'll send it to me first.
Hmm.
Because as a contractor, we ran into that where it went to somebody, it went to the bank before it came to us as the contractor. And
Got
they
it.
had
Got
to
it.
obey.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's great. That's very secure. In terms of percentage wise, because there's and I always say this, but you have to figure out what your investor DNA is, right? I personally I don't do anything in the stock market. I think it's a gamble. I don't like that. I love when I'm investing in real estate, I love everything being backed by a physical asset and long term the appreciate and it goes up anyway. But with private lending like what you do, I know you've talked about interest rates. So if I'm going to lend, let's say whether it's $100,000 or $1 million for you to put it on the street, how does that return look like from an investor side of things?
From the investor side of things, we pay between 7 and 10%
Okay.
uh, for depending on how much they put in. So for example, if they put in below 500,000, it's going to get 7%.
Hmm.
I'm sorry, below 250, it's 7%, 250 to 5, it's 8%, 5 to a million, or just below a million is 9%, and a million above is 10%. And what happens is you have two choices. If someone is an accredited investor, they can go into the fund. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, accredited investor is someone who makes $200,000 a year as an individual, or $300,000 a year on a joint return, or they have a house, they have a net worth of $1 million or more, not including their primary residence. So they can come in and they can be in the fund, and their money is deployed the whole time, or they get paid for it the whole time. And as long as they give us 90 days notice, they can have their money back. It's that simple. And on the 15th of the month, suddenly money will show up into your account. We'll send you an email. We'll send you your notice, your statement, and we say your money's in the account right now. And they don't do anything. That guy who has $8 million with me, and it's funny, I get a kick out of it because his wife will call me on occasion and she'll say, do you know how weird it is to suddenly see $45,000 sitting in my account? I didn't do anything. You just send me an email. And they just get the money in. So individuals who are not accredited, what we can do is we can put them into individual loans, either through whole notes. So let's say it's a $200,000 loan, they need to provide the $200,000. Or if they don't have 200,000, we can put them into a fractionalized note where they are, let's say, 100,000 and another investor is 100,000. So they can do it either way. The difference is that if it's on notes versus a fund, the money isn't always deployed because I don't know when people are going to call for capital. But if they're in the fund, they get paid the whole time because it's much easier for us and it's much more flexible.
Got it. But still, even if you're talking 7%, where are you going to get? I mean, like that's still a very high percentage return. I mean, where else could you get that specifically? Unless you're gonna with as little risk as this, is there any other place like?
No, it's exactly. I've got somebody now that we've created the fund, and I know we've talked about it. We've
Yeah.
just got the fund created in the last 60 days or so. So we're ramping up with it now. We're starting to take on investors and move money over to it. That guy who needed the $2 million for me in 6 hours, he has raised 40 or $50 million from family offices. And for your people that aren't familiar with family offices, those are very wealthy people that lend their own money out. They are in a completely different league than I am. They could have a couple $100 million. They could have $1 billion. So he is going to introduce us starting after the first of the year to the family offices that he's worked with. He has brought up the information to a number of them, and they're looking at it as their safe money. Now, they will do moonshot money where they'll give, if it's a big, they have $100 million, they may put 500,000 or $1 million on a moonshot, but they're keeping the vast majority in safe investments. They just consider the safe. And the ones he's spoken to about it are excited about it because they see it as safe. They see it as an advanced CD. So this
Got
is
it.
not your moonshot money. And it's funny because I always tell people I'm boring. One of the reasons I told you that I'm a whitewater kayaker, and I'll do class 4 white water. You can give me 3 15-foot waves in the middle of a river,
Yeah,
and
that's not boring.
no, I actually practice doing waves like that backwards. I've done class 4 rivers backwards because at some point I'm going to be turned around when I don't expect to be. I want to have practice in it. So I practice going backwards once or twice a year because I have been turned around when I didn't want to be, but it's cool because I've done it when I intended to. So I can do that stuff. And I know we've talked about travel. I dropped out of college and went backpacking in Europe. This was years ago, back in 1987. When the hell did I go to Europe? 1985. Dropped out of college. I had $150 in my pocket, and we had one-way tickets. People Express Airline, myself and 2 friends. They each had a couple $100, and that was it. We didn't think of anything. You just go. So I can do exciting stuff, but when it comes to my money, no. I'm boring as heck, and I want to be boring. And I've spoken with people that talk about crypto and the returns they can get. I'm not your guy. That private lending is not for you. If you want a safe, consistent return, private lend. Hey, I was in the stock market for years. I had a financial advisor out of Boston who was a graduate of Harvard in economics, and he and I had a bromance as well. And I was in the stock market for years. And then once I started researching alternative investments, I said, this private lending looks interesting. Then I spoke with the guy who was 100 million, and he said, I don't have a dime in the stock market. And he's the one that really got me into it. And it is safe, consistent returns because the property isn't going to go to zero. It's insured. I'm fine. Now, do all loans go perfectly? No. I've got a couple commercial loans right now that One guy, two different properties I've got two loans on. He had somebody who signed a 5-year lease when we lent the money and when he bought it, and the guy walked out after 90 days. So he's got $2 million worth of loans out with us. Well, because I do my background check and I do my assessment of the individual, he's been paying his interest payments out of pocket. I just spoke with him on Monday, and he's got one of the properties sold and he's got a lease for the other one. So there is you can still have a little bit of heartburn if you just look at the heartburn, but those
Mhm.
properties were, not only did he put 20% down because it was commercial, and this is where you can get a little fancy, we cross collateralized it with some other real estate that he owes. So
Mhm.
we're only in on those properties about 50% because he had
Mhm.
equity in some other properties. So
Mhm.
not only are we first on that one property, we are in second positions on other properties that have enough equity. And when it comes to equity, we don't want that other property to have more than 65% leverage on it. So simple math. If you have a $100,000 property and you have a $50,000 loan, you have $15,000. $50,000 loan, you have $15,000 of equity that you can cross collateralize against. And we're cross collateralized against properties of his in Oklahoma, and the property is in Ohio. And our attorney has done this, so he's able to do the paperwork for both states, and it goes fine.
Nice. That's very smart. What
Yeah,
about with people that have, for example, capital in like a 401k? I've heard talk of rolling that into self-directed accounts or whatever. I mean, if somebody wanted to start lending like this and throw their capital with you and they had a 401k, is there a way to do that, or does that apply or no?
absolutely. The 401k has to be self-directed. We have an organization we can set them up with, as we just refer people to them, and they
Mm,
can set them up so that they can self-direct it. And we do the
mm,
same thing with people's IRAs. It's not uncommon when it comes to 401ks for people to have them from a previous job just sitting there.
yeah.
We can get them to set it up so that it's self-directed, and they just put the money in with us and then forget about it. Same thing with self-directed IRAs, because as individuals, you can contribute to your 401k, but you can also contribute to an IRA. And if you're over 50, you get to do makeup contributions. And then if you are self-employed, and I don't know how many employees each individual has, the company can contribute. And then you can contribute post-tax to it as well.
Mm,
Oh, there are a tremendous amount of contributions you can make, both post and pre-tax. But if you choose to make it a traditional, then you'll pay taxes once you pull it out, or you can do it as a Roth, and then your growth is tax-free. It's what Peter Thiel did.
mm,
Peter Thiel was one of the founders of PayPal,
mhm.
and when the soon-to-be previous administration came in, Elizabeth Warren out of Massachusetts, I believe it was her, talked about the Thiel rule that they were trying to come up with. And they weren't going to let wealthy people do this. Luckily, that got shot down. But you can really max the heck out of your retirement by putting it in IRAs, both self-directed and your 401k.
Got
And you
it.
can
And
get very exotic with it. Something that we did that was very exotic is with the guy who has the 8 million with me. What we did with him was he set up an entity. He lent money to an entity that we helped him set up. Uh, we referred him to an attorney to set it up. We don't do it. But the attorney set it up. Well, then he set up a 401k for that entity. And his business is he is a lending company. And he lends his money to my entity that puts it on the street for him. And the way he cuts down his taxes is he takes the max amount that he can take from the company because it's a solo 401k, and you can have up to two people. So he and his wife, based on the amount of income that they get from the investing with us, and I'm sorry if this is getting too deep into the weeds, but hopefully you understand. So what they do is they then take that money and what they can contribute to it, they contribute the max from the company. That is an expense to the company. And it's a 401k contribution. They don't have to pay taxes on it.
mm,
So they have created their own 401k through an entity, and they're saving tons of money. and it's tax free.
Very fascinating. But like you were talking about earlier with the private lending model, there's like very minimal to zero volatility versus if you have money sitting in like a 401k, you're kind of dependent on the market up or down, and you might get anxiety periodically. So yeah, like for more conservative investors, like you said, boring, and or those that don't want the volatility, the private money lending is a great option.
Back in 2008, I lost 50% of my net worth in the stock market. And I felt like we knew what we were doing, but it happened. Everything crashed. And it scared the heck out of me. From 2008 and beyond, until I finally sold my second company and I started private lending, I started looking at different alternative investments where I didn't have to stress out with the stock market. Because Donald Trump can say something and the stock market goes up or down.
Mhm.
Something happens in the Middle East and the stock market goes down. And it constantly happens over and over again. And it would stress me out. If I'm over 50 and I lose 50% of my net worth in the stock market, that's going to be a very disconcerting situation for me. Um, so the private lending doesn't have the up and down. Alternative investments do not. It's just going, I get consistent returns on my money. And we're paid first. I'm paid before anybody else. And anybody who lends should do this, we have the individuals that are taking the loan sign personal guarantees. And what we will do on a larger loan is we have the spouse sign a personal guarantee as well, because some people will use the spouse as an asset protection strategy. The wife says, I didn't know. While the husband says, I didn't know, and it's a community property state. Well, if they both sign the personal guarantee, they knew. And they're going to pay that loan back because we could go after their personal assets. Now, it's never happened. I've never had a loan that we foreclosed on in 7 years. Knock on wood, it doesn't ever happen. But we are as protected as we can be, and we get the returns, and I don't have to worry about the volatility of the stock market. I mean, we had a couple months ago, it was during the summer, the stock market took a bath one day. And I had a couple people call me of my investors and say, this is great. All my friends are stressing out about the stock market, and I hate to dance on their graves, but I don't care. And one of the guys called me. He lives right near me here in Idaho. He said, hey, do you want to go on the river? I went kayaking.
Hmm.
And I wouldn't have done that before. I would have been looking at it through the hour. Oh, I got obsessed
Sure,
about it.
sure,
I
sure.
went kayaking. I came back and it had lost several hundred points. And I don't care. My properties were still what they were worth, the ones I lent on. So I'm good to go.
Hmm. Yeah, that's powerful. Mike, do you have your contact information? I wanted to flash that. Do you have it?
Oh, sure. It's Mike at
Uh,
reicapitalguys.com.
okay, do you have a screen or slide that you can share? So Mike at REI, let's see,
Capital Guys. Yeah, I'm sorry. I
REI,
don't have a screen to
that's
share.
all. That's all. REI Capital, GUYS.com. So I'll put that in the
And
chat
then
too.
you can also look at reicapitalguyscommunity.com. That's on the investor side. So just add in the word community.
Mike at reicapitalguys.com. That's the email. reicapitalguyscommunity.com is the website. So yeah, absolutely. If you're watching this right now and this resonates with you, and if you're looking for more of a conservative, a safer way to deploy capital, you should absolutely explore the private lending. Like I said, I was kind of blown away from both sides of the equation, where getting access to money without all the red tape, but also building a relationship and then being able to eventually lend and have that money out backed by physical assets, and arguably one of the safest investment classes you're going to find. So, that really resonates with me. I'll like I said, I'm going to send this replay out probably this evening or tomorrow to my list, and make sure you reach out to Mike. Mike, I also wanted just to say, like, because I know that there are people, personalities that are going to be a good fit and some that are not going to be a good fit. So can you just real quick, like, this is for you if, or this is not for you if you're like of this type of mindset or personality, maybe you've got certain initial qualification criterias where you're going to know that it's probably not a good idea to reach out. So they don't waste your time.
Okay. I want to say something first, if that's okay.
Sure,
There
sure.
are going to be a certain amount of you that have your own capital that you want to lend out. Feel free to contact me and I'll do what I can to help you. Because some people have 200, 300 that they want to put out and then they want to put money with us, or some people just want to do it on their own. I absolutely respect that. If you contact me because you're part of Matt's group, I'm more than happy to help you through it so that you cover your six and you don't lose everything. And I'm not going to get paid for it. I don't care because, quite frankly, it helps me. This is an unregulated industry. And if a whole bunch of people get into it and they don't know what they're doing and they lose their shirt, then it's going to become regulated. And that's going to be a hassle. And I have to deal with Elizabeth Warren, who scares the heck out of me. Well, and we also, on a side, we don't lend to individuals. We only lend to entities. So I don't
Hmm.
have to deal with the Consumer Protection Finance Bureau, whatever the heck
Hmm.
it's called.
Hmm.
So if you have any questions, you've got my email address. Get on the phone with me. Now, I'm sometimes slow to respond because I travel a lot. Next Tuesday, we are leaving to South America for 3 weeks. So I'm not always fast to respond, but I will respond. Okay, ask your question again. Okay, ask your question again. I'm sorry. I want to make sure I made that point.
Oh, yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I was just saying like who should
Oh,
respond to
okay.
you and who should not,
Gotcha.
if there might not be ready at this stage, type of thing.
If it's somebody who wants to be very active and very hands-on, it's not going to work because we will pick the properties, we will lend on them based on our experience. We want people that understand that we've got a couple $1 million of our own money out there. So we're not going to put you in on any loan that we don't want to be on
Hmm.
because we're with you at the same time. So it's got to be somebody who wants the time freedom and they don't want to dive deep and will answer all the questions you have, but it can't be somebody who wants to watch everything that we do. For example, I had a mechanical engineer that came to me one time. He was not a fit. He wanted weekly updates, he wanted weekly photos, he wanted to meet the borrowers, he wanted to meet the contractors. Sorry, this is not what that is. So this is for somebody who wants to watch their returns, get their monthly statement, and get their returns and be hands off and time freedom.
Passive investor.
Passive investor. I know that there are multifamily that will talk about passive investing, but
Hmm.
if you're a general partner and you suddenly get a capital call, it's not passive anymore. With this here, on the 15th of the month, you get your money, give me 90 days notice, and I will give you your principal back. We want people who are passive. That's who we're going to get along with because I have relationships with a lot of my investors. For example, I went whale shark diving in March with one of my investors last March. I went on a cruise with somebody else and their friends in January of last year. I have a cruise coming up this March with another group of people that are investors. And I'm going to Iceland in May with some investors. So you have to understand that I can't always respond to your phone call right away, but I will respond. But it's got to be you want passive. You don't want
Hmm.
hands on.
Hmm.
And I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but that's so important.
Got it. And the minimum capital requirement, because you said you accept accredited and non-accredited investors, like what are we looking at there?
It's 25 grand.
Okay.
Huh. 25 grand is what we'll accept. If you're an accredited investor, there's a
Hmm.
process that you need to go through with a third party that verifies that you're accredited. We have
Hmm.
no access to the information. They just let us know. It's an attorney or an accounting firm will say, yes, they're accredited. They verify your information. They send us a letter and they say this person is accredited. Then we're good to go. If we don't get the letter, then it has to be out of the fund and on individual notes. But yeah, we'll go down as low as 25. And what we find interesting is, and I would do the exact same thing, some people will only go in with 25 or 50,000 until they feel comfortable.
Sure.
And then they will put more money in. And I totally understand that. I would do the exact same thing. My first loan was 100 grand and I was nervous as heck. Even though I had all the processes, I wanted to make sure.
Hmm.
Now it's not a problem at all. I send those loans out all the time and don't even think about it. The $2 million loans get my attention, but the 100,000 I'm not so stressed about anymore.
Awesome. Well, hey man, I really appreciate your time today. And
Absolutely.
lots of gold information. And definitely, if you're watching this, do some research into this private lending game. It's very fascinating, and I think very soon you're going to see like, wow, this is truly one of the common denominators of how the people at the high levels are playing, but if you'd like to put your capital on the streets, this is a very great way. And you can talk to Mike. He's ever since I've known you, we've had a good relationship, and you're a very humble guy. You're a straight shooter, which I like. And then I love the fact that, like you said, where you have in terms of real estate, a pretty large background where you can assess very, very quickly what the price is here. So you meticulously track where the money is going. And, that's just extra peace of mind specifically. So I put the contact information, Mike at reicapitalguys.com in the chat. I'm going to send this replay out, reicapitalguyscommunity.com. And any final words, Mike?
No, no, just a couple. Everybody enjoy your holidays. And if you have any questions, again, don't be afraid to reach out to me. If I'm available, I'm happy to answer any question that you have, whether you put money with us or not. I want qualified people out there, and I want you to cover your six.
Awesome, brother. Appreciate you, man.
All right. Have a
Thank
good
you
one,
so
guys.
much. All right, guys.
Appreciate
We'll
it.
talk soon. Ciao.